Hello, everyone, and happy President's Day. Today is February 15th. My name is Will, and these are my thoughts. So, something kind of strange has been happening in Texas over the last few days, and I'm not actually talking about the snow. Last week, Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban came out and said that the Mavericks would no longer be playing the national anthem at their games. Now, of course, this just caused a giant kerfluffle, and it turns out that they may not end up having that much of a choice in the matter, according to the NBA, but it, of course, has sparked a very, very animated discussion with a lot of people having a lot of opinions on both sides, because that's just how things work these days. But regardless of where you fall on whether or not we should have the national anthem sung before every game that we play here in this country, I think it's worth doing a little bit of a, not quite a deep dive, but a moderate dive into the history of how we got to that point and just sort of the ramifications of it. Because there's actually quite a bit to unpack here once you get a couple of layers deep. As you might expect, the origins of the anthem being sung has a pretty strong connection to times of significant patriotism in the history of our country. The roots of this phenomenon and its eventual proliferation can be traced back to World War I, when baseball teams started having the anthem played during the seventh inning stretch of games, and then the same thing happened again during World War II. And it started out as sort of a special occasion kind of thing, like opening day, 4th of July, those kinds of times, but eventually, as they kept getting a strong positive reaction to it being played, it just kept becoming more and more frequent and bleeding over into the new sports leagues that were starting to develop over the course of the 20th century. And it's gotten us to the point now where before pretty much every game that we have in a professional sports league, whether it's at the top level or even trickling on down into the lower divisions, the national anthem gets played before every single game. And while I do understand and even encourage the connection to feeling patriotic, especially on those special type of occasions, if you do a quick bit of math, you realize that the national anthem has become ubiquitous in a way that I think very few things in American culture have. During a given season, there are 1,230 NBA games, 2,430 Major League Baseball games, and 256 NFL games. And just in the regular season, that gets us to a grand total of nearly 4,000 games, each one getting its own special individual national anthem. And if the average anthem takes about 1 minute and 55 seconds, or at least that's what it has been at the Super Bowl historically, that means that in any given sports year, a normal sports year in America, we have about 5.5 days worth of national anthems. Now that's a lot of anthem, and with that amount of volume, I could definitely see how the exercise itself could start to feel a little perfunctory or even just easy to tune out. Like, you can act as American as you want, but if you heard the same song every night 100 times a year, I can almost guarantee that it would start to lose a little bit of its meaning at least. Now, the proponents of singing the anthem in every game would say that that argument is silly, and that no matter how many times you sing the anthem, it never loses its meaning, and that it's always important. But my response to that would be, important to who? Because America's major sports leagues continue to grow more and more diverse, and as that trend continues, the anthem itself will apply to fewer and fewer of the players that we actually go to these games to see. Like, let's look at the Mavericks, because they've been the ones in the news this week. On the Mavericks roster right now, they have a player from Slovenia, obviously, and Luka Doncic, but they also have a guy from Latvia, Serbia, Germany, and Australia. You might be surprised to know that nearly a quarter of the NBA is made up of players from outside the US, and that stat is even higher in Major League Baseball. And another thing that I found kind of wild is that even in our American sports leagues, we have teams that aren't from America. And when I was calculating the stats about the total number of anthems per year and then the total time that those anthems take up, I included those Canadian teams because the Canadian teams play the national anthem, the American national anthem, at all of their games. Even if the players aren't from this country or even the team isn't from this country, the expectation is still there that they would sing the national anthem. And it's because of things like that that I feel that the argument that supports singing the national anthem for patriotic reasons veers very closely to Americocentrism, and those are not the same thing. So if the anthem gets played so much, and if the players participating in it aren't even American in many cases, then why are the leagues themselves so insistent that this keep happening? It seems to me that instead of just continuing the endless debate, the Mavericks are actually presenting a solution that will at least lower the temperature, if not pacify some of the people on both sides. And the answer to that, the reason why leagues are never going to back down from this, no matter how much it may or may not make sense, is image. At the end of the day, major sports leagues are just giant corporations that are very cognizant of how their brands are being perceived and how that perception is affecting their bottom line. In saying that the Mavericks have to perform the national anthem, Adam Silver's just doing his job. He's protecting the image of the NBA. And I've heard a lot of arguments over the last few days that that is an infringement on the players for the Mavericks and just like the Mavericks themselves, their First Amendment rights. And I do want to take just a quick second to address that. This is something that comes up in a lot of these kinds of discussions, but I just want to clarify that the First Amendment is not a protection from any sort of public scrutiny or even being fired by your employer. The Mavericks players are employed by the Mavericks organization themselves, who are all tied up and connected with the NBA, obviously. The First Amendment protects government interference. So the government can't, jail Mark Cuban for saying that he doesn't want to play the national anthem anymore. However, the NBA would reserve the right to punish him or even kick him out of the league if they so chose. They are an independent company and not a government organization, so Cuban's speech and the speech of his players are not technically covered by the First Amendment. However, I also want to say that the NBA cracking down on this and saying that the Mavericks will eventually have to play the national anthem at their games may not have the genuine motivation that it may seem like on the surface. Before you go praising the NBA for sticking to patriotic principles, remember that this is the same NBA who, for financial reasons, didn't want people going around on Twitter or people having free Hong Kong on the back of their jerseys when the NBA restart was happening. They are first and foremost protecting their financial interests. Patriotism on either side may or may not have anything to do with this. But regardless of what ends up happening with the Mavericks, I think that Cuban doing this has started a different discussion, and I think it's a good one to have, and will move us in a more positive direction going forward. Because the national anthem isn't just supposed to be a thing that we do. It's a thing that's supposed to be special and reflect what makes our country special. Even though the song itself isn't really about the country, it's just about the flag, but that's a different conversation for another day. It seems like we might finally be ready to have this discussion, and I personally am glad of that. And if you're super pro-anthem, that's fine. I totally understand. But I would challenge you over the next coming days and weeks to really ask yourself why. I'm Will, those are my thoughts, and I'll see you guys next Monday.